Welcome back. Chapter 3 of Deathwatch by Rob White. Ben, my young friend, Maddox said, resting against the boulder, the rifle still poised in his hands. We haven't been thinking this little event all the way through. You have, Ben said. What are you trying to do? Make it look like the Hornet killed this man? You see, Maddox said patiently, you're doing the same thing I've been doing, jumping to conclusions without examining the facts. So now I suggest that we both just cool off and start right from the beginning. Go through it step by step and see what we come up with. Why don't we start from right here? Ben asked. You pick up his feet and I'll pick up his head and we'll get him out of here. Because nobody is going to believe that a .22 Hornet blew a man's lungs out of his back. Maddox's voice had a chiding, teacher-like quality. You are not listening, Ben. You are not thinking things through. For example, it could be that long after this man had been shot and killed, he was shot again with a .358 to, perhaps, create a little confusion or to put the blame on someone else. And don't forget, coyotes and vultures can do a lot of damage and destroy a lot of evidence. Not if they don't get to him. You've got a point there, Maddox agreed, but let's see if I haven't got one too. You see, Ben, it just occurred to me that people in a small, isolated community may think differently from people accustomed to the big city way of doing things. He suddenly laughed. There's another thing too, which you may have noticed. There's something about me, I don't know what it is, that sometimes irritates people. I know what it is, Ben said quietly. You give people the idea that if you don't already own it, you can buy it. That's probably it, Maddox said. I guess I do throw my weight around a little, and that's what I'm worried about, Ben. You see, if we take this old man into town, there's going to be a trial. And it could just possibly be that the people involved might be a little prejudiced, even a little envious because I am better off than they are. A jury chosen from people in a little isolated desert town are naturally going to be biased against a man like me. Don't you think so, Ben? I think so. So there's that. And there's this. The trial with a prejudiced jury and perhaps even a biased judge is going to hinge on whether or not the death of this man was completely an accident. Now, you and I know that there was no intent to kill this man, but in a trial, the question is going to come up whether or not the death could have been avoided. Now, if a jury decides from the evidence although I had no intention of killing this man, the accident could have been avoided, then that puts different light on things. You follow? Maddox, you've got a lot better chance just being honest about this thing, trying to make people in my town believe that this man was killed by 2 shots from a Hornet, Ben said. Ben, I'm surprised. I thought you'd have noticed by now that I don't take chances. For example, using your rifle is what you call a contingency, something that may or may not come in handy later. It's nothing for you to be concerned about now. What I'm talking about is what might happen if we go along with your plan and take the body back to town. I'm talking about the trial they'll have and the jury. Now that jury could twist things around a little, Ben. They could take what you say at the trial and make it mean more than you wanted. In fact, Maddox said, smiling at him, you're a little prejudiced yourself, Ben, and that might show. Your testimony about what happened would be absolutely honest. I know that. But your prejudice might just tinge it enough to make the jury think that perhaps this accident could have been avoided. Maddox shifted his position against the boulder and looked over at Ben. We did have a little conversation about seeing horns. Now, if you repeated that to a group of men who have spent their lives in the desert, they might decide that it wasn't just a casual remark you made, but that you advised me not to shoot. Now, if your testimony made them think even that you had warned me not to shoot. Now, if your testimony made them think that was the way it was, then they would logically decide that this was not completely an accident. You're not thinking straight either, Ben told him. Just because it's a little town way out in the desert doesn't make people meaner or dumber than anywhere else. They'll believe the truth when they hear it just as fast as anybody else. And if you think they envy you being a dude from the city, you're wrong about that too. They like it where they live, and that's why they live there. I wish I could believe that, Medic said. But as I told you, I don't take chances. Your testimony at that trial could get me put in jail, Ben. What do you want? For me to forget you told me you'd seen horns? I'm offended, Medic said. I resent your thinking. You're thinking I'd ask you to perjure yourself in a court of law. But I'm glad you agree with me in your testimony that your testimony could result in my being convicted. Convicted and sent to prison, Ben. I have no intention of going to prison. That is not convenient. I wonder if this old man thought it was convenient for him to get shot. Medic glanced down at the rolled blanket and then shifted the .358 a little, bringing the muzzle higher. I don't think I'm getting through to you, Ben. So tell me this. Is it true that people stranded in the desert sometimes get hysterical and take their clothes off? What Ben felt was not exactly fear or even apprehension. It was more physical, a chill gripping his shoulder blades. He realized now that he had known ever since he'd seen the black wound of the hornet bullet that this was going to happen. It made him feel helpless and stupid, for the time had passed when he should have made decisions, take action, protected himself. Now it was too late. I've heard that, he said. Then you better give me your hat, Ben. Now it was fear. Acknowledging it, recognizing it, turned all the vague apprehensions into sharp, clear, clean fear. It'd been stupid to let Medic get this far without facing this thing, thinking about it. That isn't going to work, Ben said. It will work. Give me your hat and your shirt, Ben. Your boots, too. If I don't, then you force me to make a decision, which... Medic began to smile. Of course I've already made. Believe me, Ben. I don't like doing this. It's just something that has to be done. How it's going to be done, I'm going to leave entirely up to you. Medic's thumb moved slowly and deliberately. Ben watched the blued steel safety clip catch flip up. Medic's forefinger went into the trigger guard and moved down to lie on the curved trigger. It was still difficult for Ben to realize that a man could plan a thing like this, could be so coldly deliberate about it. Perhaps it will help you in your decision, Medic said, for you to know exactly what I plan to do. I think I know, Ben said. You're going to make this look like murder. You've already done that, he nodded toward the blanket, with him. Now you're going to make it sure I can't deny it. Good thinking, Medic said. Very precise. So let me tell you what my thinking is on this, or do you care to know? Ben thought about the Jeep and was disgusted with himself. How could he have known that this insane thing was going to happen? On each side of the Jeep, for at least 100 yards and downhill, for more than that, there was nothing but open ground, no place to hide, and the shale would trip him up if he tried to run. The .358 would stop him before he got halfway to the Jeep. I'd like to know, Ben said. It's simply this. You're an honest, law-abiding young man, and therefore I can trust you. We can make a deal here to forget the conversation about the horns, but in court, under oath, your honesty would be put to a severe test. I can't risk that. What you're doing is a lot riskier. No, you see, the fact must be established that you, not I, shot this old man. The way we do it, I leave entirely up to you, so let's discuss the alternatives. First, I could shoot you now. That might seem the simplest and quickest solution, but the trouble with a thing like that is it takes planning. There are a lot of details that have to be fitted very precisely. There's always a chance in premeditated murder to make a fatal mistake. So unless you insist on it, let's eliminate murder, shall we? Good idea, Ben said. The second way is for you to take off your boots, your shirt, your hat, and put them on the ground. Then empty your pockets. You can keep your trousers on, but not your socks. How far is the nearest highway? Ben looked to the west. The mountains were black now, with the sun setting behind them. About 45 miles. Good. So with no clothes to protect you from the sun, and no shoes to protect your feet, and with no water and food, you've got a long walk. I'll make it, Ben said. Perhaps. It really doesn't matter. Because if you do, the story you tell and the story I tell are going to be quite different. Medic, Ben said quietly, do you really think that the people in my hometown are going to believe you when you tell them I deliberately shot an old prospector I'd never seen before in my life? Perhaps they won't, Medic said. But here's the beauty of it, Ben. They certainly are not going to believe your story. Nobody will believe that a man could treat another man the way I'm going to treat you. They'll have to doubt your story because when you think about it a little, you'll see how insane and illogical it will be. On the other hand, my own story will be so logical and sensible, it'll be hard not to believe it. All of which, Medic went on, isn't really important because I don't think you can survive those 45 miles, Ben, with no water. I'll see to it that you don't get any. As a matter of fact, I'll harass you all the way. Ben couldn't believe any of this. And in the still, heavy heat and absolute silence, he began to wonder if Medic had said any of it. You're nuts, Medic, he said. Come on, let's get this old man in the Jeep. It was as though the small rock his right foot was on had suddenly been hit by a sledgehammer. The blow numbed his foot halfway up his leg, and from there sent sharp tingles of pain all the way to his stomach. Ben looked at the hole in the ground where the rock had been, and as though remembering it, heard the explosion of the 358. He lowered his numb foot, watching to see when it was back on the ground, and then looked over at Medic. What's your decision, Ben? Medic asked quietly, shoving the bolt home on a fresh cartridge. Ben stood, without moving, studying him. Suddenly, the feeling of helplessness, the confusion, even the fear were gone. Oddly, he felt nothing about Medic, no hatred, not even dislike. The man had ceased to exist, except as part of this problem he now had to handle. Ben realized that he had no choice at all. To make any sort of move toward the gun or toward escape would only get him killed. He flipped his hat over at Medic's feet and then peeled off his shirt, standing first on one leg and then the other. He took off his boots and socks and dropped them on the ground. Then he emptied his pockets, turning each one out as he did so. When he was stripped to the waist, barefoot and bare-headed, he looked at Medic. Okay? Medic said pleasantly. I've changed my mind, Ben. Now you're making sense, Ben said. Take off your trousers, too. You can keep your shorts on. And off with the sunglasses. Ben started to unbuckle his belt and then stopped. Can you kill a person just to keep them from answering a few questions? Just to keep from maybe going to jail for a few months? Who are you? Medic asked, his voice still pleasant. Are you really smart in school? Are you a genius or something? It felt strange to Ben to be thinking at this time of the B's and the few A's he had made. I'm not a genius. You're just a young kid. 22? I asked about you before I hired you. Nice kid, hardworking, wants to be a geologist, no parents, no wife, lots of girls, but no real girlfriend. During the last 3 days out here with you, I've found out a lot more about you. You're a nobody, Ben. And you'll never be anything but a nobody. You're a loser, Ben. The world is already too full of men like you. And there's one too many of you, too, Ben said. Some people agree with you, Medic said quietly. But who am I? I'm president and sole owner of a corporation in California. Not a huge thing like General Motors, but I employ about 600 people. I'm married. I've got 2 wonderful children. Now all of these people, my 600 employees, my wife, my children, depend on me for the food they eat, for their shelter, for their lives. I'm important to all those people, and in my business, it would be absolutely ruinous for me to be put in jail on any charge at all for any time at all, even a day. You see, I'm looking out not only for myself, but all those other people. I'm balancing them against you. and you lose. He held out his hand, and Ben dropped his trousers and stepped out of them and then dropped his sunglasses down on them. All right, Medic said. Go. But remember this, Ben. I'll be watching you every step of the way. You're not going to make it. Ben looked at him once more and then walked away across the flat top of the ridge. The smooth stone was hot under his feet, and he could feel the heat of the dying sun on his bare skin. As he walked, the muscles of his back cringed, waiting for the first touch of that heavy 358 slug. He could feel his flesh puckering in anticipation. The slope down from the ridge was not as steep on this side as the one they had climbed. He walked slowly, picking his way through loose, sharp rocks. There was not a sound anywhere. The open area ended in a jumble of boulders, and he moved in among them, hurrying a little now, for he wanted to feel the thick stone between his back and the gun. Beyond the boulders was a narrow area, and he dropped down into it and went along it until he was sure he was out of sight of the ridge. Then he turned around and, crouching, went back upward, moving carefully and slowly among the water-washed stones as he followed the trench of the REO back toward Medic. When the REO became too shallow for good concealment, he stopped and very slowly raised his head until he could see through a narrow crack where the two boulders lay. Medic was not there. It was a small satisfaction, but as Ben studied the ridge, he thought, okay, Medic, now you've made your first mistake. He could not see the old man from where he was. As he settled down to wait, he remembered the boots. Good boots, and about his size.